On the Rio Grande, south of downtown El Paso, you can't miss the dramatic imagery that's taken shape. Dozens of military vehicles parked in formation. They're flanked by armed soldiers in camouflage and tactical gear. They've become the latest players in a predicament that's persisted for decades, but has now reached new levels of urgency.
The National Guard was able to put the barbed wire fence up to be a deterrent for migrants to try to cross over illegally.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott sent 400 members of the Texas National Guard to El Paso this week in an attempt to block the flow of migrants into the U.S. They were joined by dozens of Texas state troopers as part of the governor's controversial border enforcement strategy known as Operation Lone Star.
About every 2 to 5 minutes, they're telling the migrants, please go to a port of entry to be properly processed.
The Texas military and state troopers can't arrest the migrants, but they can use razor wire to create a physical barrier that prevents migrants from surrendering to Border Patrol.
We're all Latinos. We all have family that have done this, have crossed over, or we know somebody that we're close to that have crossed over. It's a hard position for us to be. It's just hard. It's hard, but we still have to follow the law. We have to assist Border Patrol and Customs any way that they need us to assist.
But local leaders and migrant advocates have been highly critical of the military's presence in El Paso, saying that Governor Abbott is only trying to turn the border into a battleground.
Rather than assisting in the humanitarian and logistical support, Governor Abbott chose to send the Texas National Guard here to continue with the rhetoric that there is an invasion here. Clearly, you can see with the images that has taken place in the last couple of days that we have a broken system, and that's what needs to be fixed, not sending in the Texas National Guard.
If you took control and closed the border, which you can do, you would be a folk hero sung about by future generations around the campfire. I just think it's that simple. Texas, once again, takes a stand against an invasion. It's not the first time you've done it.
So, Tucker,
On Wednesday, Governor Abbott appeared on Tucker Carlson's hugely popular program on Fox News. Carlson urged Abbott to deploy more troops to El Paso. And the next day, Abbott announced he would be sending an additional 200 troops and additional military vehicles to El Paso.
There has not been reports of violence taking place here in the city of El Paso as far as immigrants invading and doing violence to residents, the El Paso residents, but there has been reports that the immigrants have been robbed by El Paso residents. So an invasion taking over, I think that's just a little extreme.
Texas-led military operations at the border are nothing new, especially in South Texas. But until now, El Paso has managed to avoid that kind of intervention. That changed when Mayor Oscar Leeser declared a state of emergency, triggering the governor's response.
A lot of times our border is militarized, not for good reasons. You know, they use us as a practice ground.
David Romo is a local historian and author who's an expert on the border. He says this kind of thing has happened before.
In 1916, there were at least 110,000 National Guardsmen that were sent to the border during the Mexican Revolution. A lot of them here in El Paso, all across the U.S.-Mexico border. And you would see, we still have photographs in the historic archives of thousands of refugees fleeing violence in Mexico coming over to Fort Bliss, where around 4,000 men, women, and children were interned at a camp in Fort Bliss. So we've seen a lot of the issues of the broader historical context that's going on today. So the Mexican Revolution was about U.S. intervention. You had a U.S. ambassador at that time that helped overthrow the government of Mexico. And that was the root causes of one of the largest migrations from Mexico to the United States in the 20th century. So you see the same things in Venezuela. How many times did the United States go to Venezuela? And because of their own foreign policy objectives help to create some of the chaos that is happening today after many years.
If past is prelude, Romo says the military will probably end up staying at the border even after the current migrant surge.
So yes, this is what we here on the border fear, that you establish a precedent and it just stays around, you know? So the National Guard is here today in times of crisis, and it's going to be very hard for them to go back.
Reporting from El Paso, Robert Holguin, KFOX 14.